Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another one of the BPA, the Business Professional Association's panel for this Thursday. You know, we're with you all every third Thursday of the month. This is our second or third iteration, I think. Jane, what is it? Our third one or
I
second?
think this might be the third.
Yeah, so we're happy you joined us this evening. We have a list of topics we're going to go through. We are certainly blessed to have Chef Joe Brown from the Bethany Abundant Harvest Catering, a renowned chef from the Melange Cafe. From some of y'all that know from back in the day, he's joining us tonight, and we also have Reverend Jonathan Walters, who will join us in a little bit. But let's go ahead and get started. I know most of y'all know me, but I'm going to start with Jane and let Sister Jane talk a little bit about her background and what she's doing right now.
So good evening, everyone. So I'm Jane Ellen Miller. I've been a member of Bethany for about 20 years. When I first was beginning my relationship with Bethany, it was our church in Summerdale. And at the time, I was the vice president of IT at Camden County College. And I've continued in the technology world. And it's kind of interesting. I've always worked in higher ed, but probably for the past 25, 30 years, I've worked for corporations that colleges and universities outsource to. So I have the best of both worlds in terms of the perks and things that a corporate environment can provide. But I also like the idea of being on a college campus and being able to mentor and being able to influence young minds and help people get to the next level. So that's really what I'm about. I started out actually as faculty at a large community college in Cleveland, Ohio. It didn't pay real well, but it was and still is my passion. So again, now I'm in both worlds. We're still in higher ed, but the corporate world too.
Thank you so much, and so glad to have you, Jane, with us. Your experience is a great benefit to all of our listeners. Chef Joe, many folks know you, but give us some background, please.
Yeah, everybody at the church knows me by Chef. They don't know my first name. They
I'm
just
sorry.
Chef. No, good evening, everyone. I'm Chef Joe Brown, and most of you know me from the restaurant Melange Cafe, which I had in Cherry Hill, Melange at Haddonfield, which was the second restaurant. I've been in the restaurant industry going on over 40 years. I've put my own cookbook out, and I've been very passionate about what I do over the 40 years. I've mentored so many, and my primary goal has always been is to cook food, be happy while I'm cooking it. And when I saw a response on your face in my dining rooms, I knew I did a good job. I started very early, believe it or not. I'm sure we're all old enough to remember when Kool-Aid didn't have sugar in it. So I always tell this story to young people trying to go into business. I remember having a Kool-Aid stand out selling Kool-Aid, and it didn't have sugar at that time. There was construction going on in the neighborhood. And that summer, Kool-Aid came out pre-sweetened. And I was selling Kool-Aid at the time at 7 cents a cup. I ran to the store and got the sweetened Kool-Aid, and I raised it up to 10 cents and thought I was making money. Believe it or not, that was my first introduction to going into business. I knew that I could sell food and make money. I've known Bishop over 25 years. When Bethany opened up in the Lindenwall location, I did the radio show. Bishop used to frequent the restaurant then. I was introduced to him by Deacon Paul Harris years ago. And, he was the head of the NAACP. He said, you got to get over there. You got to get over there. You got to talk to Bishop. You got to talk to Bishop. We met up. I brought my son into the studio. We maintained a relationship over the years. When I went through my changes and I did a shift in life and the restaurants closed, I did some corporate time and got a little stagnant with that. And crazy as it might seem, Bishop reached out to me, and about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I think I've been at Bethany, asked me to come over and be the culinary director, executive chef, personal chef, dishwasher, you name it. And loved it ever since. And here I am today.
Amen, amen. And we so glad to have you. So glad to have you. And then we have the good old Pastor Jonathan Walters.
Hey, how you doing? How y'all doing?
Good to see you.
Hey,
Good to see everybody.
Another business owner. Tell the folks about your business and what you do and what you've done, Jonathan. He's got corporate and his own entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I have a long list. I've been blessed to be able to be a part of different organizations. I actually started off in nonprofit when I first came out. So nonprofit is where I originally started, and then I went to local government doing a lot of technical work. I was a technical accounting guy, so I ended up with accounting technical degree. So nonprofit wanted to use me for both of those. So I ended up being, at one point, I was the assistant finance director, and I was the director of information systems in a nonprofit organization. And I still didn't hardly make any money. That's when I first started out. But then I was blessed to get into corporate life and running IT, managing IT departments and things like that, and traveling. But in my heart, I knew I was an entrepreneur. So during that time, ended up, starting businesses and flipping a couple of houses, getting into a lot of different things. But I ended up now I'm in the restaurant business, the service industry, the service industry. So I have a service industry business, and I have a doable medical equipment business that we're still working on. So I have a few things going, but I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. And being able to really work to, grow a lot of these businesses. Loving the Bean Street Cafe is a major business that we have right now. It's grown so much, probably grown over, I think it's 35% over the time that we have purchased it and been able to grow it, and looking forward to expanding it in the future. So that's a little bit about me.
Amen. Well, we're so glad to have this distinguished panel with wealth of experience, both corporately, both privately, and we're going to get right into it. If you have any questions, please put the questions in the chat, and we'll address your questions as they come up. But one of the things we want to start off this evening, because most of the folks that tune in either are working in corporate America trying to transition to their own business, or they have their own business and they've done a lot of different things. And wanted to ask the panel, starting off, and we'll start with Sister Jane. What had you wish, or what would you wish you had been told regarding your work experience now that you've been working for a while?
That's a really, Jonathan, stop laughing. That's a really good question. And I don't know if I really wish I had been told something. And I think it has a lot to do with my background. So I grew up in Connecticut, right? Predominantly Caucasian environment. I was in honors classes, so typically I was the only one in the class, right? I grew up in a church where our family was the only African-American family. So I had to, at a very young age, learn to adapt in that environment. And my parents were very strong in that in terms of who we were as people, but we lived, worked, grew in that environment. And I'll tell you, when I went off to college, I went to Cleveland State, and Cleveland has a large minority population, but the university itself is a predominantly Caucasian institution. And what was ironic is the number of Black students that were there. For me, from where I came from, I had not seen that many Black people. So I thought but in my classes, I was usually the only one, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing that was kind of shocking to me is at the point where I graduated, most of the Black students did not, because that environment was so unwelcoming, so foreign to them, because Cleveland is split, east side, west side. East side?
Yep, east side, west side.
Right. So the schools they came up in were predominantly Black and more nurturing, right? So I was in an environment that I was already very used to. And so I think that my upbringing and my experiences really prepared me for the corporate world. If there was something that I would want to have known, is that probably whether it's in your school environment, in your work environment, that people will act like they're friendly to you. They will act like they have your best interests at heart, and they absolutely do not. And to this day, because I take people as they are, and if you're coming at me kindly, I think of you that way. And then I find out you're not about that at all, right? And so to have known then that no matter where you are, whether it was when I was in grade school, high school, I remember when I first walked into an honors class and some of the other kids saying, "What are you doing here?" Right?
Yeah.
My response to them is, "What are you doing here?" Right? So people who know me know that I'm kind of quick like that, but to know that you're there for a reason. Folks in those environments are not necessarily your friends. That's not where you find your friends. I really coach my team on that now, that you can be friendly, but that doesn't mean those are your friends. And so perhaps if I had learned that very early on, that no matter where you are in life, that is the way it always is. The environment is that way. And therefore you have to feel very comfortable within yourself, but also learn how to adapt for the environment that you're in. But know that just because everyone appears to have your best interests, often they do not.
That's right. You can't fall for the okie doke. Don't do it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
do it. Chef, how about you? What's the one thing you wish you'd been told regarding your work experience?
You know, being the youngest of 10, I was told so many things and mentored by so many different people. And there's so much to my story because I lost my mother and father at a very early age. I lost my father when I was 9. I lost my mother when I was 16. So my family of brothers and sisters, we all raised each other. So they gave me a lot of solid advice. I think the one thing being in business, I wish I would have been told more of was knowing that your credit was more expensive than what was in your bank account.
Yeah.
And I say that because I remember going through an experience of sitting at a dining room table in a restaurant on a busy night with my accountant, and we were dealing with the CEO from a bank trying to borrow some money. And my accountant was explaining to him that, he has XYZ in the account, and they were asking me, how do I pay for everything? Well, as an independent restaurant owner, you're paying everything cash. And that was back in the day when 90% of your revenue was cash coming in.
Yeah.
So he said, "You don't have credit cards?" I said, "Well, I have one," and that was before debit card was even out. I had one, but I didn't use it because I was understanding that you use credit at that time in case of emergencies. So I didn't really build my credit profile the way I probably should have and could have over the 18 years that I was in business. So if somebody had told me, build your credit first, your bank account will follow, and don't worry about the materialistic things as much as the bigger house, the better car, worry about building your credit. And when I look back on that now, of course, with everything that's going on, I've kind of age has matured me to do better and think better. The money that I spent cash wise, can't even imagine. Everything I purchased was cash. If it was equipment, it was cash.
Wow.
That's good. That's good feedback. Hope you all are listening out there. Build that credit.
Yeah.
Don't build the credit. Credit is key.
It will make you or break you. It will make you or break you.
What about you, Jonathan?
I mean, everything they're saying is so true. I take that in because that's some of the things that kind of struggle from the corporate side. What I wish I would have known is what they call nice, nasty in the corporate world, where I had to learn how to save every email, especially from a Black young man. I had to save everything that comes in to show proof of what's going on. because in the corporate side, you run against people that, like she said, that pretend to be your friend or say to your friend, but after a while they might come at you in a such way that you didn't give them some information or something didn't happen right, process didn't go right, and you need to email to clarify yourself that how things went. So if someone would have told me more about corporate world and how, you know, how it can work or how sometimes it will work, I think that would have been very important early on. It kept me out of a little bit of trouble when I was in my 20s. But from the perspective from an entrepreneur, I think the biggest thing is he said it clearly. I think the establishing credit cards, establishing a credit for your business. I found that out pretty quickly, but it still took me a little bit of time trying to get these businesses off the ground. And you have to have leverage on your business side of your credit, not your personal credit, your business side of your credit. Yep. You want to get to the point where your business is able to have credit and stand alone by itself without you being responsible for it. Otherwise, you are a liquid bank, and you can't be that way, and you can't survive that way because you're putting your assets, your money, your liquid money, which is your dollars, into a business, and you're never going to grow as far as you want to grow. So I think that's the biggest thing, because you need to establish your credit, because regardless, you're going to need something that your cash that you don't want to put your cash into. You want to be able to borrow something that you're able to leverage and establish your credit. That way you can build from that. So
I always say you have to be able to buy money cheap.
That's it.
And a lot of people don't really understand that. But if you've actually worked with cash and you've gone to finance, there's no difference. You go to finance a car, you get a good rate or a bad rate.
That's it.
You have to be able to buy money cheap.
That's it. And the payments are worth it when you have your own business. It's fine to have payments. Well, as long as you can keep your liquid assets.
There's such a thing as good debt and bad debt, right? Debt's not bad, but there's good debt and there's bad debt. And as I hear the three of you talking, one of the things that I knew, my dad always told me you don't need nearly as much as you think you need.
That's right.
And we already have one comment here, and I was going to say the same thing. So thank you for this comment. Is that I wish I would have been told how and where to invest money. And this was back in the 80s. So I would say the same. I would say the same thing. I was told to save your money. So I knew to save my money, right? But from an investment standpoint, I really didn't even, I was into 401k at work, whatever. But when I talk about saving money and the things that you really think you need, but you don't need, there's a whole lot of things I didn't need. From the time I came out of school and the time I got married, that if I would have invested that money, it would have done miracles, for me. And you learn those things. And if you can start, just like folks like to get things, if you can get into the habit of investing and saving, you start to really like it.
No, that's true.
You start to really like it. So just for instance, when our son before he was born, we started a 529 plan. Well, hey, guess what? We never had to take $1 out of our pocket because that plan was working for 18 years and he went to, a very expensive school. So I would just say, invest your money early, invest your money wisely, pay yourself, just like you're paying your tithes, you got to pay yourself, and you got to do that. You got to do that early. Another question I know that is on our listeners' minds, and all of you have been faced with this, is the key. What is the keys to running a successful business, particularly during the pandemic? We'll start with you, Jonathan, on this one.
Oh, wow. Really good question. The pandemic, it really changed I think it changed the business perspective for, anyone in any type of business. It changed the outlook of how we look at a business now. I remember when it first started in March or April, we took a hit. We really took a hit. Everybody just stayed in the house, and they didn't order anything. They didn't come out. They didn't come to our restaurant. We really was in a bad situation. Thankfully, they put rules in order where we didn't have to pay like a rent or something, or we can work them out with the person that owned the building. But at the same time, we had to adjust. And so there was an adjustment period that we had to figure out what's the new plan, because we know in this in this season, it wasn't meant for us to die as a business. We just got to figure out how to adjust.
Mhm.
So our adjustment came during this season in quickly pivoting to a new model. And that became a model of basically going to more of a, using the DoorDash Grubhub delivery model. And so the delivery model was the key to us, being able to survive during this pandemic. So I think that the ability to be able to pivot from what you used to do is your key. If you sell something, now you might have to sell it online. If you sell it in person, you might have to sell it online. If whatever you did, you have to adjust and pivot for this season. And there's a way to do it because everyone is doing it now. You have to figure out what that way looks like for your business and what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to do. Once we were able to pivot, we were able to increase our sales, and things have been running pretty good since then. I mean, we had to adjust to some of the fees and things like that, but that's a part of the adjustment. And now you see that people have been a little bit more, they're more confident with food delivery. And so I didn't think that would ever happen, but people are confident in food delivery now. So that works out for our business, but people have to decide what that looks like for them and what they're selling. But I think the online model for whatever business you have needs to be adjusted.
Yeah. Jane?
Jonathan took the words I was thinking, and pivot was a key word. I keep saying that the shutdowns in March forced us to pivot. If you did not pivot, you were not going to survive. Right. And so even from a corporate perspective, and in this case, a college perspective where everyone is online, and my team was responsible for bringing everyone online. Wow. It meant that was a way that we needed to be able to move. That was a way that we still needed to be able to communicate, that people could no longer come to an office or a department. So how are you communicating to them? There started to be more Facebook type scenarios from the college. The president started doing a weekly blog, right? Wow. You got to get people where they are. Wow. Started seeing us more on LinkedIn. And then even the corporate office, the company that I work for, more of a presence on LinkedIn, right? And the use of hashtags and also learning how you do things so that you constantly move up to the top of everybody's feed, right? It's really, that was the pivot. And then in my case with IT and our departments where students like to come on campus to get services, they couldn't. So how does a faculty advisor work with somebody? So we had to do things with rollout chat and rollout chat bots, right? And so the technology in this environment is the way to survival. So even for the college, part of my job, because there are colleges and universities that are not going to survive this.
That's right.
They will not, right? And others will be very much reduced. And so figuring out how do you now attract those students? Because if everybody's online, then I can go anywhere. I'm no longer geographically, having to stay in a particular spot. So that, I think that pivot and being very, very comfortable with the technologies that help you reach your market was key and remains key.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Chef? I'm sorry, Jonathan.
No, I was gonna have a quick question for Jane. I'm curious. Did you guys have to order a lot of more bandwidth? I mean, was it about the
we already have crazy bandwidth. In fact, a recent vendor told us we had the bandwidth and the infrastructure of a Fortune 500 company, which is you don't see that in a college, and you typically don't see that in a community college. Okay. So we were good there, right?
Wow, that's good.
But getting equipment to everybody, because while everyone had equipment at work, right, desktop systems, getting laptops, and when you start talking about 5,000 employees and you got to do it quickly, that was an interesting challenge. But I think I'm built for challenges like that, and I thrive best. Yeah. And I think that's where you have to know what your sweet spot is, right? I thrive best with being innovative when it's chaos. And so that just worked for me to the point that IT in most places has been seen as very back office very operational, right? And the fact that they started seeing us as extremely strategic and understanding the importance of it to the business, right? And that the business can't function if we don't know how to help you function. So, yeah, so our bandwidth was always strong, right? But then we had to come up with protocols, because sometimes you still got to go into that NOC, into the Network Operations Center, those types of things, right? And there was a mandate on that everything was shut down and people don't go in. I'm also in New Jersey. The college is in Maryland, right? So I'm managing a team of 170 and communicating with everyone. And so that showed also the importance of the technology, and that it was strong technology, right? So that being able to.
No, I'm sorry, Jen. I think that what you just said brings up a very pertinent point that is very important. And that's relationship, right? You're in Jersey, the college is in Maryland. You know, here I am running a global business with people all around the world reporting to me. And there, you know, by this time I would have been in Asia 2 or 3 times and in Europe 2 or 3 times, but I haven't been anywhere, right? Since February. And so, you know, I always tell folks having money is great and being smart is real great. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to who you know. You got to make sure that the relationships that you've established are solid, that you don't burn bridges even when things don't work out the right way, that you always have that rope to get back. Now, sometimes certainly you just have to move folks along, but in business, you know, particularly when you're in business for the long term, relationships are key. And you have to make sure you establish them in a way that folks can trust you, folks can depend on you, folks know that what you say you're going to do it, and not have to worry about it. I mean, you think about just now folks that are working from home like me, still, and also think about the statement out of sight, out of mind. So if folks aren't seeing you, you still may be doing your work, but are you remaining relevant to the people that you're working with and you're working for? You know, and if you haven't established those relationships and those work ethics, folks are going to think, hey, let me call Rich. He can help me with that. If I'm working in my own bubble over here and not engaging the people on a consistent level, not every now and then, but a consistent level throughout the organization, not just to the folks that work on my team or the folks that I work for, but throughout the organization, touching those touch points. It's very important to be able to do that, so that once you come out of this, it's not like, oh, I forgot you was even here, you know, and they've forgotten about you. And I think some folks have even shied away from thinking about getting promoted or even getting a new role during this pandemic. But if you can be relevant, if you can help solve a situation, whether it's how to make sure I'm able to connect with people, how to make sure I'm able to get the resources that we need, that's going to show your value, right? That's going to show your value. There are people getting promoted during this pandemic. There are people finding new jobs during this pandemic. And it's just because they're out there doing that thing to establish those relationships. So I wanted to jump on that a little bit, but you know, getting promoted or finding a new role during the pandemic, it is something that can be done.
You know, for me, and it's interesting because when you guys say pivot, it was more of a shift for me. You know, the church is set up church first. And you know, we had the hotline of food to serve off of that people will come back and fellowship and eat. You know, when I was in business for those 18 years and before I even got into business, I was more tech savvy. I knew everything. I did my own websites and everything. So having a discussion with Bishop, I said, we have to shift. We have to shift because we have to take it to the next location and bring the food to them. Fortunately, I had a following. So we went to the curbside. It's more labor intense and we don't have the volunteer help. So I'm now teaching a young lady who is my sous chef how to work at restaurant pace as opposed to church pace. And when I tell you, we cook everything to order. I mean, we're doing fresh pastas and everything. People come and get the food, and it reminds them of the restaurant that I had. But then we have the church folks who are like, wow, this is a whole different level.
Yeah.
And now my challenge going into this is taking the older part of the congregation and educating them on how to order without being intimidated online.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So
Right.
we're actually working on trying to put tutorials together to teach the older congregation, this is how you do this, because this is the wave of the future.
This is
That's
it.
right.
And if anybody is not adjusting to it, they're going to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. That's it.
And it's a safe way for them to order their food, right?
It's safe.
It improves the safety and doesn't expose them to some things.
Absolutely. And the fact that they can still pull up to their church,
Right.
Under a carport
Yeah.
and securely get their food and take it right home. You can't get that. I don't think there's a church in Jersey that's doing curbside.
Because they know who's cooking their food too. And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we've actually increased sales probably over 30 or 40%
Wow.
to what we were doing normally. Now, the interesting
Wow.
thing is that a lot of the audience that I've been able to tap on, of course, it's a lot of people just come to the restaurant, but we're bringing people down from New York.
Yeah. Wow.
When they're coming in for drive-in service, they're ordering food while they're sitting out there waiting. They come through and they're gone. People from Philadelphia. Why would you travel over the bridge from Philadelphia to come to a church to get food? Because they know they're not getting garbage. They're getting food that's prepared fresh for them. And that's been a big shift for us.
Chef, I just had it yesterday. It was so good. I'm just sorry. It was so good.
Was that you eating in the parking lot?
Yeah, it was me. That was me. It's so good.
I had some on Saturday, and I didn't want to share it with my family, but I did. But I did.
The interesting part is
a good point that post a reliable vaccine, because I'm not going to say post pandemic, because COVID's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? But people talk about when we get back to normal. We are never going back to the way it was pre-pandemic. And so if you are not doing some of these things that you've shifted, because now what you find is a lot of people actually prefer to go online, order, come pick it up, and keep on going.
That's right.
And on Sundays, some of the times when I would get things, I would get it not to eat there, but to take home. So to know that you have done that in a way that's convenient for a lot more people, why would you not continue that? And then you can still have the folks who like to come in, right? But you don't want to lose those who like this other way. And I think for any business that you're in, or even any corporate environment, to think that it's going back to the way it was, you are sadly mistaken. So we're already looking at the college that there will be students who will now demand to have courses taught online, right? Because it's more convenient for them. And we have students who have full-time jobs, they got families, that commute time, they don't have that, right? So, and now we also know employees and other corporations are already recognizing this, can work remotely, right? And they don't need to lease all of these buildings. The college is looking at, we don't need all these buildings. And so the world is shifting and pivoting due to this pandemic, and you need to be ready for that.
Yes, certainly.
I believe from my owner, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say from my owner's perspective, looking at, looking like down, you do look at building expense. Why do you go back and get back into a building when you see your employees are able to, basically work 100%? And many times these employees work more than that because they're at home and they end up picking up that laptop and going right back in there and finishing some project or some assignment. I watch my wife sometimes. She just go and grab the laptop again. So you end up putting in more hours, and I think you look at it better instead of being distracted. You have those moments where you're not distracted. I think sometimes or many times the work ends up being better. So from a level of, paying for business expenses, heating and air and all these brick and mortars, I think it's a great opportunity. And I've seen some companies like Microsoft and all these companies, they are looking at this and saying, yeah, I'm going to get out all these buildings and save this money. And so this is a great time for people to go into, find jobs that work from home and end up working from home for a long time. I think it's
That's
a
right.
great time for people to start applying for stay-at-home jobs.
But this is a double-edged sword, and I look at the hospitality industry on the job loss that's going on.
Yeah.
So as these buildings start closing up, you're losing all maintenance crews. You're losing servers. You're losing cooks. I mean, you can go on and on. You're losing security. So what concerns me moving on to the next year, or actually the next administration, is where the job creation's going to come from.
That's true.
Because there's a lot of jobs that are going to have to be replaced as we make this shift going into virtual. There's a lot of replacement that has to be done.
That's a good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chef. I mean, the level of service industry is well beyond what folks, I think, even imagine. Just imagine downtown Philadelphia, right? All the restaurants that are open for just breakfast and lunch.
Yep.
Right. Or the shoe shine place, or the barbershop, or the nail salon. Just because even if they're open, if there's nobody in the city, they can't survive. Because it was a convenient thing. Working downtown Philly was very convenient, just to go out and do whatever needed to do. Jonathan knows, he was downtown too. It was very convenient. So if you lose that, as you're saying, to be able to bring that back, or where those jobs are going to be. Now there will be some other creation. There will be something, but that's going to be we have to get back to some type of normalcy with regard to not only hospitality but entertainment, whether it's airplanes or hotels or cruise liners or resorts. Musicians. The athletes are doing okay, but that's going to be. I certainly agree with Jane. What we left is not what we're going back to, but what we going back to can't be what we are now from a sustainable standpoint. But on that point, whether it's from a corporate standpoint or entrepreneurial standpoint, how should folks be thinking about mitigating that risk? Because there's going to be some uncertainty there. So how do they start? Is it like I have to have a plan A, B, and C, or I have to, shift, or do I pivot, or what are some of the things folks should be thinking about now?
I think you should get I think most people, if they're prepared, they should start developing their own business plan right now. And it should be internet based, one way or another. And for me in the food service industry, the big thing that's coming up now is pre-prep food. You're seeing a lot of chefs that are doing this now. Pre-prep food that you can order online and is delivered to you. So I already see the shift for chefs, and I'm just talking about chefs and cooks. It might be different for Sister Jane. It might be different for Jonathan because he's dealing with coffee. Jonathan, you're probably getting into maybe delivering your own personal grain coffee. So I think that the move now should be going to build your own personal business and develop a revenue line so that you have something to rely on, because it's on the internet. There's a ton of businesses popping up. And it's the information that's out there, like we use Square. Square has so much marketing material in there. You can run a small business out of there for nothing. And build it. And when I started in the restaurant business, I had to buy a build that page. Eventually I got to the point where I had to pay somebody to administer that website because I didn't have time. It's all set up for you. There's templates out there that you can build a whole program, a beautiful business off of, and nobody knows it's you because you're behind virtual.
Hope everybody just heard Chef give a really hot tip right there. About Square.
I think you did. And that tip is certainly related to purpose that Bishop has been teaching us about for years. Absolutely. Everybody is good at doing something really, really well. Everybody has at least one gift. That's in the Bible. But everybody is good at something. Don't be afraid. Young, old, middle-aged. Don't be afraid to step out on faith wisely, of course, and don't just leave a job and go out and do something. Don't do nothing crazy.
No, we're not saying that.
But understand that there's nothing wrong with building another river, another stream, another flow. Some people do it through starting a business. Some people do it through investing in real estate. We just got a comment from Sister Jones here, who's in real estate. Some people do it through invested in the stock market. So there's a lot of different ways to get another stream of income coming in. So when things like this happen, there's something else you have there to depend on. And you have time. You're not going nowhere. Where you going? There's nowhere to go.
That's so true. And so you have to know what that gift is that you have, and typically your gift is going to be something that you're passionate about. So my son and I actually started a business, and it's very similar to what I do now because it's offering services to colleges and universities. And our first customer was Meharry Medical College. And so we do very well with that, but I can't do it right now because the corporation I work for calls that a conflict of interest. Because I'm going after the same people they're going after, right? But the point is that when I've decided I've had enough of this, right now I'm having fun, I've got something else. So, and like I say, it has to, people ask me, when are you going to retire? Right? And I said, when I'm no longer having fun. I said, what would I do, Dan? So now don't get me wrong, there are challenges and there are some interesting days, interesting people, right? But the majority of what I do, I like, right? And most of my days are pretty good. So I think that's it, finding what you're good at, what that gift is, what you're passionate about. And even if you're in the corporate world, look at how you could turn that into a business for when you're not. And I actually opened up that business when I got laid off or let go from another corporation. And it was interesting because then I went head to head with them, right? And got the contract. So that's about relationships, which we spoke about earlier. So it all really dovetails into the same thing.
That's good. I tell you, I think it's the best way to mitigate your risk right there, what she's saying and what Chef's saying. I mean, it's nothing else really to say. You have to have that business plan. You definitely have some type of gift. I mean, I was watching Good Morning America this morning, and a guy came up with a sock with a zipper on it. The zipper on the sock is for a credit card or money because he got tired of people getting pickpocketed. And so his business is doing very well. It's socks with a zipper on it that you can put a credit card in. I mean, and he sells it online, making a lot of money. So there's something that we all can have or discover that we can create and put online or be able to sell. You have a gift. One of the things I did a lot of was I was almost like black box when it came to putting projects together in my IT world. So I took that same model and I rolled it out in one of my businesses I had before, and I just hired some tech guys and I would just call around to different departments or businesses, and we would install all the IT equipment. I mean, it's an easy model because I had the model. I learned the model while I was working. So that was my model, and I can put it to play somewhere else. And I can still do it anytime I want to. And a lot of times you have some things that you have inside of you that you can put it in play whenever you want to. You have to be able to work and probably perfect those things that you have at your job. So while you're working, you're not just working just to work, you're working to perfect something. So whether I have a barista at my job, be the best barista you can be. Be the best, chef or whatever you can be, so you can take that same gift at any moment and jump somewhere else. Nobody has you bound in an unemployment space because you have that gift.
That's really, really good counsel right there, Jonathan. I think sometimes folks are depending on something other than themselves to be able to get themselves to where they really need to be. You know, we get to this place where we have been given the promise by God that He's not going to leave us or forsake us, that we can trust that He's going to see us through. And as Sister Jane already said, doesn't mean it was easy. Doesn't mean I don't have a bad day every now and then, but most of my days are good. Doesn't mean my days aren't hard, because guess what? Hard work is, hard.
That's right. That's why they call it work.
Exactly. Hard work is not supposed to be easy. So
it was easy, everybody be doing it.
Exactly. So it's important that we get into those spaces where and also the kind of people that you're with. people that you allow in your circle. Bishop always talks about, Pastor Nick always talk about, you can't surround yourself with those folks that aren't going to be taking, and sucking energy out of you. You have to be folks that are helping to encourage you and lift you up and be a positive influence in your life. And sometimes, and Bishop's been talking about this every Sunday for the last few weeks, you can't have those toxic people there's a toxic people in your work environment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're in corporate America, there are toxic people there. You can't be associated with those toxic people, and you have to identify them. You have to identify them very quickly, and that doesn't mean you can't work with them. Doesn't mean that, but you have to identify them as toxic and know that they're not going to be of any benefit to you, other than how it relates to what they need to be doing for the corporation or the business. And of course, in the corporation, if they're too toxic, then we'll have to find a way to offer them up to the competition. That's what I like.
I like that. That's good.
But talk about that a little bit. How you've managed. And I was in Milan's Cafe on New Year's Eve once when I saw Chef Joe throw somebody out the restaurant.
You were there that night?
He was acting a fool and threw him out the restaurant. I was there.
Dropped a couple of N-words on me in my business.
But talk a little bit about some of the conflicts that you've had to deal with, whether corporately or in your business, and what you learned from them and how you migrated through those instances.
Me? Oh.
All of y'all, but go ahead, Chef.
I mean, that particular night was one of the crazier ones. And you got to understand, I was the first Black-owned restaurant in Cherry Hill.
Wow.
All right. Simple as that. Mm-hmm. And we were constantly under the scope. And it was a situation where the guy came in. He was off the street. He wanted to use the bathroom. Didn't want to leave the bathroom. I knocked on the door. He wouldn't open the door. I had to get a butter knife to unlock the door. He didn't want to come out. He dropped the N-word a couple of times on me in the middle of the dining room. Oh, wow. I and my sister-in-law grabbed him and drug him across a couple of tables. Now, you got to keep in mind, it was New Year's Eve, and we were getting ready to get the second floor of people coming in.
Yeah.
We had just got finished serving probably about 150 people. And if you've been at my restaurant in Cherry Hill, it was only 45 seats.
Wow.
So we just got finished serving about 100 and something people.
Wow.
And we were waiting for the next late night seating to come in. And they were lined up at the door. So, if I look back on it now, I probably would never touch the guy. I probably would have just called. But my adrenaline when I'm busy has a tendency to be at a place that some people we've never seen. Rich But, I've learned over the years, one thing about being in business, and an old gentleman taught me years and years and years ago, probably about my third or fourth year being in business. Learn this if you don't learn anything else. He said, learn how to say no. Mm. And it stuck with me to this day. He said, learn how to tell people no. If you can't do it, you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. And don't ever let a customer or a person hold you hostage for their needs. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that to this day. And I teach that to anybody today that's going into business. You should never take on more than you can handle. Yeah. And he said, never forget, learn how to tell somebody no. And no is no.
Mm-hmm. And no has to mean no.
Exactly. It has to be.
Right.
Has to mean no. Going back to folks that tend to take on you, I want to hear from Jonathan and Jane on this same question about dealing with conflict. I remember back years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, Pastor Nick was already Pastor Nick. And there were some folks that I was dealing with all the benevolence at the church at the time. And folks would come and they would want things, just like that from the church. And Pastor Nick said something to me one day. He said, your emergency isn't necessarily my emergency. That's what folks need to understand. Just because it's an emergency to you doesn't mean it's an emergency to me. So, and in terms of letting folks try to take advantage of you, and that will happen and does happen, whether you're in corporate America or or an entrepreneur. But Jonathan and Jane, talk a little bit about how whether it's a story or just how you've dealt with or deal with conflict in your businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because during this season, I had conflict with a person who I actually report to. And it's interesting. I report to three people. I have a boss in the corporate office. I report to the president at the college, but I report to a senior VP for day-to-day operation, right? And that individual, I'm trying to think how to put it, was extremely unreasonable, right? And in terms of emails to me were not only harassing, but very hostile. And I felt additionally, right, just keep outperforming and they will get it. But it wasn't that way, right? And it became worse to the point where other people were seeing it. And I finally went to the CEO of my company and I said, you know what? You're going to have to pull me out of there. And I've never left a job before a contract. And then I met with the president and I said, I told the CEO to pull me out and here's why, right? And so I think there's sometimes when there's a conflict and you cannot get around it, over it, stop it, right? Then you have to be prepared to take a stand. And sometimes that means you may need to leave. And I determined that environment was so very toxic that it was a hazard to my health. Right? And so I was prepared to do that. Now, would I have done that in my 30s? Maybe not, right? But I think that when it starts to impact how you're doing, you need to be able to do that. And it's interesting that once that happened, certain other things happened. That person will now be retiring, right? Yes, they've been helped to retire. But I also noticed the level of stress that came off of me, right? And so while I was already viewed both by the corporation and the college as a top performer, I feel like I'm even better, right? Wow. I'm not dealing with the toxicity that was coming from that individual. So, I think that sometimes you have to determine that you have to stand up for yourself. And it may mean that you're going to be looking for another job. And you have to gauge your whole situation, right? And people said, oh, well, you work for the company, you'll be fine. I said, no, not necessarily. At this point in time, in this pandemic, at that point, they weren't getting new contracts from colleges and universities who were trying to figure out what they're doing and where they're going and will we be around. So, but to me, my ability to not be stressed to the point where it was a health hazard was more important than whether I was going to be in that job. So other times with conflict, I'm either bringing, if it's a person who reports to me, I'm sitting and I'm counseling, but I document the heck out of things, right? And I've always done that. And I think the other way that I'm able to deal with conflict is I'm a straight shooter. And so I don't go into any situation, any job where I am not going to be honest, because then I can always defend my position, right? And so, for me, what's worked best is dealing with conflict head on. But again, in those situations where it's not going to change, then I'm prepared to remove myself for the benefit of me. Right? So I think that's what's worked for me and what continues to work for me.
That's real talk. That's real talk.
Yep.
Jonathan, you got something for us?
Yeah, and I picked up one thing she said when the toxic person was on her device, whoever he was, that she elevated her game even more, thinking that would stop. And what I found out in my situation, something like that happened to me, where I elevated my game, but at the end of the day, when they was out of the way, my game was so high because the toxic person kept bothering me, I made myself so much better during that time period that it's almost like I don't want the toxic person there, but because it was there, I was able to be even better as a person in that particular job. And so I when I left that job, I was a better manager because of his toxicity. I hate to say it like that, but I ended up being better because I could think of everything that a toxic person could think of before they got to it. I was always trying to outrun somebody that, I was always trying to be the best, even though if nobody was in my environment, trying to be the best I could do. But that toxic person kind of showed me how they think, how certain people think. And so I was able to use that for my benefit. And I was always, in every one of my jobs, and I look back on it, I was always the youngest Black person in that job, especially a Black male. So I've sit in a lot of room with a lot of people with white hair, and I would be the only person in there discussing what I'm discussing. And mainly that was the IT functionality in the corporate world. But from the flip side, on the entrepreneurial side, it's not a lot of Black people that owns a breakfast cafe that we have. And so we deal in the area that we deal with a lot of situations where color kind of matters in some situations.
Colorful situations.
yeah, colorful situations. And so we have to be able to deal with that a lot in the conflict, because they come in and they see who the owners are sometimes, and they want to challenge that. Why do I have to wait 5 minutes for my bagel with peanut butter or jelly or something like that? They would go somewhere else at Starbucks and wait 20 minutes for a microwave sandwich that they put in the microwave, but breakfast sandwich, but they won't wait 10, 15 minutes for the fresh, egg and bacon, on a everything bagel from a Black owner. So that's a challenge there, and you have to be able to mitigate that conflict without disturbing your other customers. Especially from a Black perspective, they want to see you get outraged sometimes. And so I have to be able to handle those situations. Larry has to be able to handle, the other owners have to be able to handle the situations in a way that we're able to, make that a smooth transition, that everybody don't get to see exactly what we're saying sometimes. Yeah. So we handle the conflict straight on, but sometimes we have to quietly handle it as we're, dealing with some of the patronage, I guess you call it, customers, as they come through the door. So in that environment, we have to deal with it head on. We have to deal with suppliers, like that too, as a Black owner. Sometimes, the way they sell some of their foods is different, or the way they sell some of their IT, some of their internet packages are different. So we have to deal with all that. And when you deal with it, like she said, you got to deal with it head on. And so you have to be able to talk to them and be able to deal with that head on. So
yeah, you have to be able to deal with those situations head on. And I would say that, having all of us being people of color, we all know about explicit and implicit bias. The explicit bias, somebody doesn't care about you. The implicit bias is you have to check. You have to have that discerning spirit. For most of us, if not all of us, that have been managers for all times, of people that didn't look like us, had never worked for anybody that did look like us.
Exactly.
That's a variable that they're dealing with, because I've been a manager for over 20 years, and in every instance of managing people, none of them had ever worked for a Black guy before.
Yeah,
that's a dynamic that they're not used to. But it's just like it's kind of like raising kids. I don't treat my son the way I treat my daughter. They're different people. So when you're managing these people, I can't manage I'm a very direct person, but I can't be direct with everybody, right? So it's making sure that we understand the explicit and implicit behaviors of the people that we're working with. And that's something we'll probably want to delve into more. We're running close to the top of the hour. I really appreciate, Jane, as always, your wealth of information and encouragement to our folks.
So much.
And certainly, so thank you.
Yes.
Chef, thank you for all of your insight, and Jonathan, God bless you, man. And certainly, we are here every third Thursday of the month. We want to hear what topics you want us to talk about. So please email us at social@gotobethany.com. social@gotobethany.com. We'll be back December 17th. Look forward to seeing all of you. Please stay safe. please stay well. Don't mess with this virus. It'll jump on you. God bless you. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you soon. Take care. Have a good evening. Bye now. Okay. Bye.